This week in our community, there's been some sadness. There's been some loss. We mentioned last Shabbat the recent loss of Helen Boudin. May her memory be a blessing. A beloved member of our community who passed away last week at the end of the Simchat Torah holiday at age 102. Her funeral was this past Sunday. Her family shared about her in her eulogy. She had these words of wisdom on her refrigerator for many years in her home. Make peace with your past. Time heals most things. No one is in charge of your happiness but you. Don't compare your life to others, and don't judge them. You have no idea what their journey is all about. Earlier this week, we learned of the recent loss of Mort Schrag. May his memory be a blessing. A past president of our community, author of 2 books, including his memoir, Lemonade Stand, which he released here in an event in Newmark Hall in the summer of 2024. Mort's family shared about him. He always carried with him a deep love for Jewish education, Jewish summer camps, and Israel. He always sang and hummed folk music around the house. When he and his wife Lorraine hosted the Passover Seder, he never failed to extend each Seder just a little bit by leading everyone in an extra round of the Chad Gadya chorus. And on a different note, both more communal and more personal, the Jewish world learned the loss of Rabbi Arthur Waskow this past Monday. If you were here for the Yom Tov holidays of Sukkot and Shmini Atzeret, you heard me teach from Rabbi Waskow's book, Seasons of Our Joy. For me, this book was the single most impactful teaching I have learned on the Jewish holidays and the Jewish year. Even though I never met him in person, he became a teacher of mine through this writing. Now, interestingly, as the Jewish world remembers and eulogizes Rabbi Waskow, most people don't first remember this particular book that has meant so much to me, that I have taught throughout my years as a rabbi. At the very beginning of the Jewish Telegraphic Agency's obituary of Rabbi Waskow, we read, Waskow was arrested more than 24 times for his activism. Oy, religion and politics. While I have great respect for Rabbi Waskow, as you have all seen as I share his teaching, my political orientation and his are not exactly identical. When I learned of Rabbi Waskow's passing first, I was hit with a wave of sadness, and as I started reading more about his legacy, I was drawn right back into perhaps the most pressing concern of this particular moment, the changing relationship between religion and politics in this country in the context of the changing relationship between the political state of Israel, Medinat Yisrael, and the other nations of the world. Since the most recent presidential inauguration in the United States, I have received a tremendous number of impassioned requests for members of this community to address political issues in a partisan fashion. And I have stated from this bima a tremendous number of times that my role here is to teach Torah, to speak about Jewish tradition and Jewish law, to share the ancient wisdom of our shared tradition in ways that speak to the moment. While it is my role to endorse political views and slates in the World Zionist Congress, it is not my role to endorse particular American political parties or candidates, or even to hint at doing so. This is especially true because we here in this community have diverse views, and it's my role to bring our community together at a time where it seems like every force in the world is trying to divide us. And as I continue to hold this line, conditions around us continue to change. I think most of us are aware that this past summer, the IRS announced that it had changed an important policy. As of July 2025, synagogues, churches, and other houses of worship may indeed endorse political candidates without losing their tax-exempt status. Apparently, according to surveys taken in 2017, 2022, and 2023, Americans think this is not a good thing. Americans think that houses of worship should refrain from endorsing candidates. But the law now reflects otherwise. Any synagogue that wants to endorse one candidate over another may now legally go right ahead and do so. Last week, I attended a community event in my capacity as a rabbi. It was an event that I had attended the previous year. At that time, the event is well supported and successful. But this year, things felt different. This year, things are different. Several of the keynote speakers at this event spoke about particular American elected officials in ways that came far too close to endorsements of parties and platforms for me to feel comfortable. The words the speakers used were just barely parve enough, but the feeling in the room was that of a political rally. That wasn't what I signed up for. And this week, my email inbox was flooded with opinions of every variety on the mayoral election in New York City. I know all of us have been reading about this, thinking about this, talking about this, and, shockingly, not shockingly, I have received impassioned requests from members of this community to make particular statements and take particular actions. Of course, these requests reflect conflicting viewpoints, conflicting courses of action. Interestingly, I have yet to receive a question that expresses curiosity about Jewish law and tradition and what they have to say. Enter this week's parashah, Parashat Noach. Rabbi Arthur Waskow loved to teach about the story of Noach and the covenant of the rainbow. When Noach left the ark and saw the rainbow that God put in the sky, Noach received God's covenant that God would never again flood the earth. For Rabbi Waskow, this week's parashah gives us an opportunity to remember that God's first covenant was not only with human beings, but with all living things. Clarifying further, this covenant was not only with Jews, but all human beings. Of course, eventually the Jewish people received the Torah at Mount Sinai, along with our 613 mitzvot. But our tradition also teaches that at the time of Noach, all of humankind received 7 commandments. We read this in Talmud, Masechet Sanhedrin 56a. 6 are prohibitions, things not to do, and 1 is an imperative, a thing we must do. Together, this group of 7 commandments are called the Noahide laws. Here are the prohibitions. Don't curse God. Don't practice idolatry. Don't engage in illicit sexuality. Don't kill. Don't steal. And don't eat flesh from a living animal. And here's the imperative, the thing we have to do. Create a system of laws. Commentators differ in some details about what precisely this means, what it includes or does not include, but the bottom line is, humans can't just be told what not to do. They have to be supervised by one another and held accountable. We can't just assume that everything will be fine. A few years ago, Rabbi Manis Friedman gave a vort, a very brief Devar Torah, and it was called Big Government or Big God. It addresses the question, this is from a few years ago, should government step in and regulate the big banks? After all, he says, it seems like the people in the financial industry can't do it right themselves. They can't operate without corruption. He acknowledges that this viewpoint might make sense at first, but he states further that this viewpoint is missing something essential, so much so that this view can be dangerous. He continues and explains, people can come together and build a democracy if they have a firm set of moral convictions. If people can be honest, they can build a society based on trust. And humankind has been able to do this. We know this is possible. We know this can work. And he asserts, in order to strengthen democracy, we must strengthen these moral convictions. Because if you can't trust people, you won't be able to trust the government either. He urges us to go back to what he calls God's original plan, the Noahide laws, the 7 commandments, 6 prohibitions, and 1 imperative. Don't curse God or worship idols. Don't engage in illicit sexuality, and don't eat flesh from a living animal. Don't kill, don't steal, and establish a system of laws so that we can hold each other accountable. Which is to say, make a commitment with one's fellow humans, with one's neighbors, Jewish and non-Jewish, to live a moral way of life. When we do that, we can trust one another. When we do that, we can trust our democracy. This week, Rabbi Angela Buchdahl reaffirmed to her congregation in New York City It remains our conviction that political endorsements of candidates are not in the best interest of our congregation, community, or country. The explanation for this is in the 4 core principles of her community. We are a spiritual home. Our primary mission is to provide a sacred space for prayer, learning, and connection among Jews of all backgrounds. We cherish diversity. Our congregation reflects a wide range of political views, and we honor that pluralism. And we speak through Jewish values. When we engage with political issues, we do so through the lens of Jewish teachings and tradition rather than partisan platforms. And we have not and will not, she says, endorse candidates or parties. Our role is not to enter political campaigns or endorse or speak out against candidates, but to provide moral and spiritual clarity on important public issues. So let me be clear here today, using my own language inspired by Rabbi Bakdal. All American leaders and candidates must reject the idea that Jewish self-determination, that Zionism is in any way up for negotiation, or that Jewish inclusion is something that others have the power to grant. As a proudly Zionist community here at Adat Shalom, we know and we affirm that anti-Zionism is anti-Semitism, and this has never been more clear than it has been in the past 2 years. Unfortunately, we are living in a time when our democracy is in dire need of renewed strength. We can't help but see in our lived experience what Rabbi Manis Friedman points out, that there indeed, and very sadly, is a connection between a loss of trust in the workings of our government and a loss of trust in the individuals who comprise our government. But there is something we can do. We can work, lead, and teach ourselves, our families, and our communities around us to live a moral way of life. More concretely, we can vote, and we don't have to stop there. There are many political organizations, both Jewish and non-Jewish, where electoral politics is the core mission, and we can get involved. And no matter who is in office or who will be in office, we can and must engage in advocacy for Zionism, for the Jewish people, for Jewish community, and against every form of anti-Semitism. This is our new normal. This is our new challenge. The constant presence of partisan politics in religious communities is here to stay, at least for now, continuing to impact communities like ours who cherish ideological diversity and continue to honor pluralism. We must keep our focus on providing sacred space for prayer, learning, and connection. We must speak through the lens of Jewish tradition on these issues of our day. Parashat Noach teaches us that we have the responsibility to build a society based on honesty and trust. May every action we take and every vote we cast bring that vision into reality. Shabbat Shalom.